The girl had been hidden for 17 years. Her family had sworn to keep her secret, had built their lives around the concealment, had structured every decision and every moment around ensuring that she never came to the attention of the crown. A lie that had required constant vigilance, constant sacrifice, constant fear, but it had held. Until the day of the first oath. The first oath was older than the kingdom itself, older than the throne, older than any written law. It was the original binding, the magic that had founded the realm and given it structure, marking them, counting them, ensuring that all were accounted for and bound to the new ruler. It was supposed to be a formality. It found them, always, to answer instead to the name her family used in the village Mara, a common name, unremarkable, the kind of name that drew no attention, which market days were safe and which brought too many strangers. She had learned to live as a ghost in her own life. Her family had never told her why she needed to be hidden. There are things about you that would bring danger if the crown knew, things we cannot speak of. You must trust us. You must stay hidden. And Lyria had trusted them, because what choice did she have? She was a child and then a young woman, and the secret had become so woven into her existence that she could no longer imagine life without it. The hiding was simply what she did, who she was, the shape of her world. Until the day the new king took the throne. She felt it the moment the first oath activated. It was more like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. She felt the first oath sweep through her like a wind, touching every part of her, reading her, marking her, and she felt it recoil in recognition. Found. The word echoed through her mind in a voice that was not her own, ancient and absolute. A command that wrapped around her were like iron chains. Come. Lyria gasped, her hands flying to her chest, and she felt something ignite inside her. A mark, invisible but undeniable, burning itself into her very essence. The first oath had claimed her, had bound her to the new king, and she knew with terrible certainty that she could no longer hide. Mother, it found me. Her mother's face went white. She looked toward the house where Lyria's father was working, and she called for him with a voice that cracked with panic. He came running, and when he saw Lyria on the ground, he knew immediately what had happened. How long do we have? I do not know, her mother said. The records say that those marked by the first oath are compelled to come to the capital within 30 days. If they do not come willingly, the oath brings them by force, by madness, by dreams that will not stop until they obey. Then we run. We take her beyond the borders, to the unclaimed lands where the oath does not reach. It is too late for that. The oath has marked her. It will follow her anywhere within the kingdom, and crossing the border now would kill her. The binding is too strong. Lyria's father knelt beside her, taking her hands. Lyria, listen to me. You must go to the capital. You must answer the summons. If you do not, the oath will destroy you. But why? Lyria saw 17 years of secrets, of fear, of choices made in desperation and carried in silence. You are blood-marked, her mother said quietly. You carry the old blood, the line that was supposed to have been extinguished 300 years ago. If the crown knows what you are, they will either kill you or use you. We hid you to protect you from that fate. What is the old blood? It is the bloodline of the first kings before the current dynasty took power. You are a descendant of that line, Lyria, and the first oath has just revealed you to the new king." Lyria stared at her mother, the words not making sense, too large and too impossible to process. "I am no one. I am a gardener's daughter. I have no power, no magic, no claim to anything. You have more than you know, and now the king knows it, too. It tells the king exactly who and what you are. Then I am already dead. Not yet. Not if you are clever. Not if you are careful." Her father squeezed her hands. "Go to the capital. Answer the summons. But do not reveal more than you must. Perhaps you can return to us." But even as he spoke, they all knew it was a lie. The first oath did not make mistakes. The king would know exactly what she was, and once he knew, everything would change. The journey to the capital took 14 days, and because the oath's compulsion was hers alone to bear, she had never been so far from home. The world beyond her valley was larger and stranger than she had imagined, full of cities and crowds and people who moved with purpose and confidence she had never learned, not by people, but by something else. The oath itself perhaps tracking her progress, ensuring she obeyed, when the noise and color and sheer number of people made her want to turn and run. But the oath would not let her run. But the oath did not care. She approached the main gate, her heart pounding, and the guard there looked at her with suspicion. "State your business." "I was summoned," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "or expecting someone like her. Wait here." He disappeared into the gatehouse, and Lyria stood in the courtyard. But when the guard returned, he was accompanied by an older woman in robes that marked her as a palace official. "You are Lyria?" The woman led her through corridors that were too grand, too polished, too far removed from anything Lyria had ever known. Servants moved through the halls with silent efficiency, and nobles paused in their conversations to watch as she passed, their eyes curious and appraising. Lyria kept her gaze on the floor, her hands clasped in front of her, and she tried to make herself as small and invisible as possible. But she could feel their attention, their interest, and she knew that her attempt at invisibility was failing. The woman brought her to a chamber near the center of the palace, a room with tall windows and furniture that was both beautiful and intimidating. "Wait here," she said. "The king will see you shortly." And then she was gone, and Lyria was alone. Everything she knew about royalty came from stories, from the rare travelers who passed through her valley, from fragments of information that her parents had shared reluctantly. She did not know what to expect. She did not know what to do. And then the door opened, and the king entered. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with dark hair and eyes that were sharp and assessing. He wore simple clothing, not the elaborate robe she had imagined, and he moved with a controlled grace that suggested both power and restraint. "Do you know why?" She hesitated. Her parents had told her to reveal nothing, to keep the secret as long as possible. But the king was staring at her with an intensity that made lying feel impossible, and she remembered what her mother had said. The oath had already revealed her. The king knew. "Yes," she said quietly. "Then tell me. I carry the old blood." The king studied her, his expression unreadable, and Lyria felt her heart hammering in her chest. She waited for anger, for orders to have her arrested or executed or locked away. But the king only nodded slowly, as though confirming something he had already suspected. "How long have you been hidden?" 17 years, my whole life. "And your family?" They hid you deliberately? Yes, they feared what would happen if the crown knew. They were right to fear. The king crossed the room and stood by the window, looking out at the city below. The old blood was supposed to have been extinguished. Every heir of the first dynasty was hunted down and killed 300 years ago when my ancestor took the throne. Or so the histories claim, but the first oath does not lie. I do not want power or claim or whatever it is you think I have. I want to go home. I want to return to my family and live my life in peace. The old blood carries power, magic that my line does not possess. The first oath would not have marked you so strongly unless that power is significant. Tell me, have you ever felt anything unusual? Dreams, visions? Small things she had dismissed as imagination or coincidence. Times when she knew what someone was going to say before they said it. Moments when she felt emotions that were not her own, radiating from people nearby. The king's voice was firm. I do not fear you, but I am wary because you represent something that was supposed to be impossible, a threat that was supposed to be extinct, and I do not yet know what to do about that. Lyria felt cold settle into her bones. Are you going to kill me? But I am not going to decide today. You will remain in the palace, under observation. You will be given quarters, clothing, everything you need. But you will not leave. Not until I understand what you are and what risk you pose. I am not a risk. I am just a girl who wants to go home. You are a girl with the blood of kings and the power of the old magic. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The first oath does not just bind you to me, it binds me to you. I can feel you now the way I feel all my subjects, but stronger. I will know if you try to escape. I will know if you lie to me. Bound to a king she had never wanted to meet, carrying a bloodline she had never asked for. And she realized with growing horror that her parents had been right about one thing. The crown would never let her go. The days that followed were strange and disorienting. Lyria was given a room in one of the palace's side wings, far from the royal chambers, but still more luxurious than anything she had known. She was not a prisoner, exactly. She could move through certain parts of the palace, could walk in the gardens, could access the library. But she was watched constantly. Guards followed her at a discreet distance. Servants reported her movements, and she could feel the king's awareness of her, a presence at the edge of her consciousness that never faded. The first oath had created a connection between them, just as he had said. She could sense him sometimes, feel his emotions like distant echoes, frustration, suspicion, curiosity, and something else, something she could not name, that felt almost like longing. The current king's ancestor had been a general, a trusted advisor who had grown hungry for power. But they had never fully destroyed the bloodline. Some had escaped. Some had hidden. And the descendants had carried the secret through generations, hoping to survive, hoping that one day they might be safe. Lyria was one of those descendants, and now the secret was out. She was in the library one afternoon. The awareness came through the first oath, a sensation like a thread being pulled taut. She looked up, and the king was standing in the doorway. You spent a lot of time here, he said. That your family killed mine, that we were supposed to be extinguished, that I should not exist. He stepped into the room, and she saw that he was alone, without guards, which was unusual. Do you resent me for that? For what my ancestor did? Lyria considered the question. I do not know you well enough to resent you, but I resent what I have become. I was happy in my valley. I had a life simple but mine, and now I am here, trapped, bound to a throne I never wanted any connection to. You think I wanted this either? The king's voice was sharp. The first oath does not ask permission. It binds, and we must accept the binding. I have a kingdom to rule, and now I have you a living reminder that my family's legitimacy is not as absolute as we claimed. The oath will not allow it. You are bound to me now. If you leave the capital, the binding will cause you pain. If you try to hide again, it will find you. We are connected, whether we like it or not. Lyria felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Then what do you want from me? The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I want to understand you. The first oath marked you for a reason. It does not just identify bloodlines, it identifies potential, power, threat, and I need to know which you are. I have told you, I am no threat. Your intentions may not be threatening. If word gets out, I cannot even go home. Of the first what life am I supposed to have here? Blood still flows. I do not know yet. Those who the king's voice figurehead slightly, a symbol to rally behind. Trying to find an answer. There will be rebellion that ends with your death. Claims why should I believe anything you say? I am the usurper. Your family built its rule on the graves of mine. That will not matter to them. Because you can feel me through you regardless. Just as I can feel you. Stood, frustration boiling over. Lying. Then what am I supposed to do? Realizing he was right. I cannot leave. The connection between them was not just one way. She could sense his sincerity, his genuine struggle with the situation. He was not lying. He did not want to kill her, but he also did not know how to let her live without risking everything he had. What is your name? She asked quietly. Your real name, not your title. He looked surprised by the question. Why do you want to know? Because if we are bound together, if this connection is permanent, then I should know who you are. Who has hopes and fears and dreams that have nothing to do with bloodlines or thrones or ancient magic. Theron looked at her, and for the first time she saw him as something other than a king. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, loneliness, the weight of a crown that allowed no rest. I understand, he said quietly, more than you might think. Separated by a history neither could change, and they both felt the impossible complexity of what came next. I will try, Theron said finally, to find a way for you to live, to find a place for you in this kingdom that does not require your death or your imprisonment. But you must be patient, and you must trust me. Trust does not come easily when you are a prisoner. You are not a prisoner. Then let me leave. I cannot. Then I am a prisoner. He had no answer for that. He left the library, and Lyria remained, surrounded by histories that had been rewritten to erase people like her, and she wondered if there was any future in which she could be free. The weeks passed, and Lyria began to understand the rhythms of the palace. She learned which servants were kind and which merely dutiful, that he walked the palace walls at sunset when he thought no one was watching, and she learned that the connection between them was growing stronger. It started as awareness, the ability to sense his location, his emotional state, his presence. But over time it became more. She began to feel his thoughts sometimes, not clearly enough to read them, but enough to know their general direction. She felt his concern when he dealt with difficult council members. She felt his frustration when petitioners brought him problems he could not easily solve. When she stood in the gardens and missed her home so acutely that the longing became physical pain, the palace staff began to notice. Servants whispered about how the king would sometimes pause in the middle of a conversation, his attention drifting, his eyes going distant, as though listening to something no one else could hear. She would be reading in the library, absorbed in some ancient text, and suddenly she would close the book and stand, drawn toward some other part of the palace. And Theron would be there as though they had agreed to meet, though no words had been spoken. The first oath was doing more than binding them. They were becoming aware of each other in ways that were intimate and uncomfortable and impossible to ignore. One evening, Lyria was in her chambers when she felt a spike of pain through the connection, sharp, sudden, originating from Theron. Guards called after her, but she did not stop. She found him in the training yard, sitting on a bench, his hand pressed to his ribs, his face pale. A practice sword lay on the ground nearby, and his sparring partner, a young guard, stood a few feet away, looking guilty and terrified. She pushed past the guards and knelt beside him. "You are hurt." He looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "How did you know?" "I felt it, through the oath. Let me see. Lyria, it is not appropriate. I do not care about appropriate. Let me see." The practice sword might have been blunted, but it had been swung with enough force to break skin. She called for the palace healer, but while they waited, she pressed her own hand to the wound, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. And as she touched him, she felt something else. Not just the connection between them, but something older, deeper. The old magic stirring in response to his injury, trying to help, trying to heal. But she let it flow, let it move from her into him. Theron gasped. "What are you doing?" "I do not know. But it is helping, is it not?" He nodded slowly, and she felt through the connection that the pain was easing, that the bleeding was slowing more than it should have. "The old magic," the healer murmured, looking at Lyria with something between fear and awe. "I have read of it, but never seen it. The first kings could heal with a touch, could mend what was broken, could give life back to those who were fading." "I did not mean to," Lyria said. "I did not even know I could." "The magic responds to need," the healer said, "and to connection. The magic recognized him as yours to protect, and it acted." Theron stood carefully, testing his ribs. The pain was almost gone, replaced by a dull ache that was already fading. "This is what the council fears. This is why they want you dead. Because you have power they do not understand and cannot control. I cannot control it either. Perhaps not yet. But you will learn, and that terrifies them." The incident spread through the palace like wildfire. The girl with the old blood had healed the king with a touch. The ancient magic had awakened. The power that had been extinct for 300 years had returned, and the council's fear intensified. They called another emergency session, and this time their demands were more forceful, their arguments more desperate. "She is dangerous, Your Majesty. She has power that could overthrow kingdoms, that could change the very fabric of how we rule. You must eliminate this threat before it is too late." "She is not a threat," Theron said, his patience wearing thin. "She saved my life. She healed a wound that could have become infected, that could have killed me. How is that threatening? Because next time she might choose not to heal." It is prudence. She felt his anger at the council's refusal to see her as anything other than a threat. She felt his exhaustion from defending her day after day, meeting after meeting, with no end in sight. But his belief that he could convince the council, that he could make them understand that there was a path forward that did not require violence or exile or death. That evening, when he came to see her, she saw the toll it was taking. He looked older than his 30 years, worn down by the constant pressure, the endless conflict. "I am sorry," she said. "This is my fault. I should never have used the magic. You did what you felt was right. You responded to my pain because the oath connected us, because you cared enough to act. That is not something to apologize for. But it has made everything worse. It has revealed the truth." The council's fear was always there, Lyria. The magic simply made it visible. They would have found another reason, another excuse. This is not about what you did. It is about what you are. Then there is no solution. As long as I exist, they will fear me. As long as I have the old magic, they will see me as a threat. And as long as I am bound to you, I will put your throne at risk. Theron sat beside her on the bench in her chamber, comfortable, and through the connections, she felt his exhaustion, his frustration, and beneath it all, future, something else. How? He said, by making you indispensable, by having you use the old magic not to threaten, but to help. There are places in the kingdom where the healers cannot reach, where disease and injury take lives that could be saved. There are droughts in the south that the old magic was said to be able to end. I want you to become who you were meant to be, not a threat. Lyria was quiet for a long moment. What then? Then we learn from it. She looked at him, and through the connection she felt his sincerity. He believed this. He believed in her. And that belief was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "I will try," she said, "but only if you promise me something." "What?" "If this goes wrong, if I become the threat they say I am, you will stop me. You will not let affection or the oath cloud your judgment. You will do what is necessary to protect the kingdom. Lyria, promise me." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded. "I promise." But through the connection, she felt his certainty that such a day would never come, and she did not know if that certainty was wisdom or naivety. The campaign to prove Lyria's value began the next week. Theron arranged for her to visit the southern provinces, where a drought had been ongoing for 3 years, where crops were failing and people were beginning to starve. He sent word ahead that a healer was coming, someone with unusual gifts, someone who might be able to help. He did not mention the old blood. He did not mention that she was a descendant of the first kings. He simply sent her, accompanied by guards and healers, and he waited to see what would happen. Lyria was terrified. She had no formal training in the old magic, no understanding of how it worked or what it could do. She only knew that it responded to need, to connection, to the desire to help. The land was cracked and dry, the rivers reduced to trickles, the fields barren. She did not know what to do. She had healed Theron by instinct, by touch, but this was different. This was not a person, but the land itself, and she did not know how to touch it, how to reach it, how to make it respond. "Help me," and the magic answered. It flowed from her like water from a spring, pouring into the ground beneath her feet. It flowed across the field, soaking into the parched soil, and where it touched, Green shoots began to appear, impossibly fast, as though months of growth were happening in moments. She woke hours later in a makeshift shelter, her body aching, her mind foggy. The healer sat beside her, looking relieved. "You nearly killed yourself," he said. "The magic took too much. You must be more careful." "Did it work?" "See for yourself." And people moved among them with expressions of wonder and joy. The ancient magic had saved a province. She was not a threat, but a blessing. And the council, watching from the capital, found themselves unable to argue for her death when the people were singing her praises. But not everyone was pleased. Some saw her growing popularity as proof of the danger she posed. What would stop them from demanding that she take the throne from Theron? The council's fear transformed from fear of her power to fear of her influence. And that, in many ways, was more dangerous. Theron felt the shift. Through the connection, Lyria felt him become more guarded, more careful in how he spoke of her, more aware that every word could be twisted. "The more visible I become, the more they see me as a rival to your rule. Then we give them no choice but to accept you," Theron said. "We formalize your position. And the first oath has bound us so tightly that separation is painful for both of us. Why continue to pretend that we can function apart when we both know we cannot? Because consorts are chosen for political advantage. They are alliances, marriages of convenience, unions that benefit both families. I have no family. I have no political advantage to offer. I am just a girl from a valley who happened to carry the wrong blood. You have the old magic. You have a connection to the land that I lack. You have proven that you can help people in ways I cannot. That is worth more than any political alliance." Lyria turned away from him, her mind racing, wanted to stand beside him officially rather than existing in this liminal space of prisoner, guest, threat. But another part of her was afraid, and afraid of what it would mean for her and Theron, because the connection between them was no longer just magical. It had become personal. She cared about him. She thought about him constantly. She worried when he was stressed and felt relief when he was at peace. She was falling in love with him. How much time, I do not know, but please do not push me on this. Not yet. The first oath was doing more than binding them. It was merging them slowly and inexorably, creating a connection that went beyond magic or duty. They were becoming aware of each other in ways that were intimate and uncomfortable and impossible to ignore. Theron seemed to feel it, too. He came to see her more often, at first with excuses checking on her welfare, asking about her studies, ensuring she had what she needed. But the excuses grew thinner, and eventually he stopped pretending there was any reason beyond wanting to be near her. "This is not normal," he said one evening as they walked in the gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and they were alone except for the distant guards. "The first oath is supposed to create a bond of loyalty, of duty. But this ... this is different. I know. Do you think it is because of the old blood? Because I am not just any subject, but someone with power of my own? Perhaps. Or perhaps the first oath recognizes something we do not yet understand. The old texts speak of the first kings ruling not alone, but in partnership." Lyria's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I am the descendant of the family yours destroyed. I am the threat you are trying to contain. How could we possibly rule together? I do not know." When they were together, she felt calmer, more centered, more herself than she had felt since the oath had marked her. The connection did not just bind them, it completed them. "This is impossible," she said. "Yes, I know." "Then why are we even discussing it?" "Because I am tired of doing what is necessary without questioning if it is right. Because I am tired of ruling alone, making decisions that affect millions while having no one who truly understands the weight of it. Because the first oath has given me something I did not know I needed, and I do not want to give it up just because it is inconvenient." And she saw that he was beginning to care about her, not as a problem to solve or a threat to contain, but as a person, as someone who mattered. And she realized with a sinking feeling in her chest that she was beginning to care about him too. But perhaps it will not. Perhaps this is what the first oath was trying to show us all along, that the old way and the new way do not have to be enemies, and I am offering you the same trust in return. They stood in the garden as darkness fell, two people bound by an oath they had not chosen, carrying bloodlines that were supposed to be enemies, and they both felt the weight of the impossible choice before them: trust or resist, connect or withdraw, build or destroy. The palace was in uproar when the truth began to leak. Theria did not know who had spoken first: a servant who overheard too much, a noble who investigated her background, a guard who recognized something in her features that echoed old portraits. But within a month of her arrival, whispers spread through the capital like wildfire. The old blood lives. The council convened an emergency session. "She is not our enemy," Theron said, his voice controlled but firm. "She is a girl who was hidden her entire life, who has no political ambitions, who wants nothing more than to return to the life she knew. What she wants is irrelevant. What she is matters. She carries a bloodline that challenges your legitimacy." "Then let them see," Theron said, and the room fell silent. "Let them see that I am confident enough in my rule that I do not need to murder a girl who has done nothing wrong. Let them see that I can acknowledge the past without being threatened by it." Another council member, an older woman named Ilara, leaned forward. "This is not about confidence, Your Majesty. This is about stability. If word spreads beyond the capital, and it will, there will be unrest. There will be those who demand she be recognized, elevated, given power. And there will be those who demand she be eliminated to protect the throne. Either way, the kingdom will be divided. Then we control the narrative," Theron said. "We acknowledge her existence openly. We explain that the first oath revealed her, that we have investigated her thoroughly, that she poses no threat. We show strength, not through execution, but through mercy. Mercy is weakness. No, fear is weakness. And executing her would be an act of fear." The debate raged for hours, and Lyria, confined to her quarters, could feel echoes of it through the first oath. She felt Theron's frustration, his determination, his growing anger at council members who saw her only as a problem to eliminate. And she felt his fear, too, though he hid it well. Fear that he was making a mistake, that he was risking everything for someone he barely knew, that he was letting the connection between them cloud his judgment. When he finally came to her that evening, he looked exhausted. "They want me to kill you," he said without preamble. "The council, the nobles, even some of the guards. They see you as a threat that must be eliminated." "Then do it," Lyria said, her voice flat. If that is what it takes to give you peace, then do it. I am tired of being a problem. I am tired of being a cause of conflict. End this." Theron crossed the room and took her hands, and through the touch, the connection between them flared. "I will not kill you. I will not execute someone who has committed no crime simply because of blood she did not choose to carry. Then what will you do? I will protect you, even if it costs me the support of my counsel, even if it weakens my position, because it is the right thing to do." "Why?" Lyria pulled her hands away, frustrated. "Why do you care so much?" "You owe me nothing. Because I think the first oath bound us together. I am your enemy's descendant, your dynasty's nightmare, given what that reason is. Why not just be done with me? Is to destroy because you. Of this. What if I reached out and placed his hand over her heart, down your and throne, she felt the first oath pulse between them, strong but I will not destroy you because we are connected in ways I cannot fully of what might happen. Because when I felt something crack inside her, like myself, some wall than I have felt in years, to protect herself from caring about him, from letting the connection mean more than just magical compulsion. "You are a fool," she whispered. "Probably. But I am a fool who is choosing to trust the magic that founded this kingdom, even when it leads me in directions I did not expect." He left, and Lyria sat alone in her room, feeling the weight of his choice, feeling the burden of being worth protecting, and wondering how long either of them could survive the consequences. The assassination attempt came a week later. Lyria was in the library, as she often was, trying to find some mention of others like her, others with the old blood who had survived. She was so absorbed in her reading that she did not notice the figure approaching until it was too late. The blade flashed toward her throat, and she had only a second to react. She threw herself backward, the chair toppling, and the blade missed her by inches. Her attacker, a palace guard, she realized with shock, advanced quickly, raising the weapon for another strike. And then Theron was there, appearing from nowhere, moving with speed that suggested he had felt the attack through the first oath. He caught the guard's wrist, twisted, and the blade clattered to the floor. The guard struggled, but Theron was stronger, and within moments he had the man pinned against the wall. "Who sent you?" Theron's voice was cold, deadly. The guard spat at him. "The kingdom does not need the old blood to return. Better she die now than lead us to civil war." "Who sent you?" But the guard only smiled, and before Theron could stop him, he bit down on something in his mouth. Poison. He was dead within seconds, collapsing to the floor, and Theron was left with no answers. He turned to Lyria, who was still on the floor, shaking. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. Theron helped her to her feet, and through the touch she felt his rage, his fear, his determination. "This cannot continue. I cannot protect you if my own guards are trying to kill you." "Then let me go," Lyria said, finding her voice. "Let me leave the capital. Let me disappear. It is the only way this ends without more blood. The oath will not allow it. You would die before you reach the border. Then what do we do?" Theron looked at her, and she saw a decision forming in his eyes, something desperate and radical and possibly insane. "We change the rules. We give them something they cannot argue with." "What do you mean?" "I mean we make you untouchable. We elevate you, acknowledge you, give you a position that makes it clear you are under my protection, and that any threat to you is a threat to me." "How?" "I make you my consort, my partner." the one who stands beside the throne, bound to me not just by the first oath, but by choice. Lyria stared at him. You cannot be serious. I am. It is the only way. If you are my consort, no one can touch you without committing treason. If you are bound to me publicly, then any attempt on your life is an attempt on the throne itself. Your council will never allow it. I am the king. They advise me, but they do not command me. The nobles will revolt. Some may, but others will see strength in the alliance. The old blood and the new united. A symbol of reconciliation rather than division. And what about us? Lyria asked quietly. What about what we want? You are offering me a position I never wanted, a title I do not deserve, a role I am not prepared for. And you are doing it to save my life, not because you actually want me beside you. Theron stepped closer, and she felt the full force of the connection between them. That is not true. I do want you beside me. The first oath showed me that you are what I need, even if I did not know I needed it. You challenge me. You balance me. You make me a better king. And I hope that I do the same for you. This is madness. Yes, but it is also the only way forward that does not end in your death or my failure. Will you accept it? Lyria looked at him. This king who had every reason to kill her and every reason to fear her, and who had chosen instead to protect her, to trust her, to offer her a place beside him. She thought of her parents, of the life she had lost, of the future she had never imagined. And she thought of the connection between them, the way it felt right when they were together, the way the first oath seemed to approve every time they chose each other. Yes, she said, I will accept it, but not because I have no choice, because I choose you as you have chosen me. And the first oath, ancient and absolute, sang with approval. The announcement was met with exactly the chaos Theron had predicted. Half the council resigned in protest. Several noble houses declared their opposition. There were demonstrations in the streets, some supporting the union, others condemning it. The kingdom was divided, uncertain, afraid of what this meant for the future. But Theron stood firm, and Lyria, terrified but determined, stood beside him. The ceremony binding them was not a marriage. Exactly that would have required more time, more negotiation, more acceptance. It was something older, a ritual that invoked the first oath itself, that formalized the connection between them, that made her not just a consort, but a co-ruler, a partner in the truest sense. When they spoke the words, when they clasped hands and felt the oath surge through them both, Lyria felt something fundamental shift. She was no longer just marked by the first oath. She was woven into it, connected not just to Theron, but to the entire kingdom, feeling the land and the people in ways she had never imagined. And she understood, finally, what the first oath had been trying to show them all along, that the old blood and the new were never meant to be enemies, that the first kings had not been destroyed, but waiting, hidden, for a time when they could return not as conquerors, but as partners, that she and Theron, bound together by magic and choice, were the fulfillment of a promise 300 years in the making. The kingdom did not accept them immediately. It took years of work, of patience, of proving that their partnership made them stronger rather than weaker. But slowly the opposition faded. The nobles who had protested saw that the kingdom prospered under their joint rule. The people who had feared the old blood's return saw that Lyria had no desire for vengeance, only for peace. and Theron and Lyria, bound by an oath they had not chosen but had learned to embrace, became something neither dynasty had ever been alone. They became whole. They ruled for 34 years, and when they died within days of each other, because the connection between them was so strong that neither could survive without the other, the kingdom mourned not one ruler, but two. And the first oath, which had betrayed Lyria's hiding, but had given them both a future, settled onto their daughter, who carried both the old blood and the new. The dynasties were finally united, and the kingdom, which had been divided by fear and history, learned to heal. They had hidden her from the crown, but the first oath had known better. It had betrayed the secret to reveal the truth, that she was not meant to hide, that she was meant to rule, and that sometimes the magic that seems to betray us is actually saving us. This has been a story of hidden bloodlines and revealed destinies, of an oath that betrayed to protect, of two rulers who learned that unity was stronger than division. If this tale moved you, if you felt the weight of secrets or the power of chosen connection, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Was the first oath a betrayal or a blessing? Can old enemies become allies, or is trust too fragile to bridge such divides? Your reflections give these stories meaning, and I would be honored to hear them. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the silent bond, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, so you may return when the next story is told, when another oath is revealed, and when destiny perhaps chooses once more.